Smith.
Here.
Foreman.
Yes.
James Lee is not here. Olson.
Yeah?
Kylie.
Yes.
Mr. Bagley.
Here.
Mr. Mustang.
Here.
Mayor Grinke. That's it. Okay.
Thank you.
You have a quorum
Excellent. Let's go ahead and do the minutes. Do you do them individually or do you want to do them together for approval? Or do you-
now. I'll rely on the attorney, but I don't see any.
I don't think there's a rule that says we can't take them together.
One is an official meeting, the other was a work session since it lacked a quorum.
Do we have any objection to just putting them together and approving the official one? Okay.
Make a motion that we accept the minutes as drafted. Said they did any other suggestions? I didn't see anything.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you very much. Okay. Moving on to continue review of possible amendments to subdivision regulations. Final draft.
That was the hope.
I will.
Please don't, Jim.
Hi. Hey.
Hi,
Just
Jim.
in time to hear the explanation.
Yeah.
I will own up to being overly confident, a little bit of hubris involved, but I had prepared what I thought was a clean draft and went to a couple parties and Monday, no comments, which were closed Tuesday. Morning, I still hadn't heard anything. I thought I was home free, so I sent out the official notice of meeting with my comments saying that I would have clean copies available and I would distribute them to people so they had a chance to look at it in advance. And indeed, I gave Mr. Smith the copies when I went to get a haircut. And then I came back and I had copies that were all marked up. And to a certain extent, there is still something lacking that I'll get to in a second. So I made the relevant changes, and that's what you have before you
Okay.
with the one big gap in it. And I certainly will encourage you to study them, and I will hopefully tomorrow or the next day email out the section A of subsection A of section 11, which is final plat.
Okay.
The list of things that have to be on the document. I had a list that got eaten by a computer. I went back to what Mr. Foreman suggested, and somehow I didn't have the complete list, and I was getting terribly confused, and I needed to defer to him, and he was in Jeff City this morning. Of course, I was too, for different reasons.
You could have contacted me. We could have postponed the meeting.
That was after sent out.
That was after I sent out the stuff Tuesday morning. It was a little late, or otherwise I would have.
Hence is why I called Tuesday and I said, shouldn't we have
So,
a draft in our hand?
This has several eyes to review typos, but Merritt's got his red pen out, and he's changing things again.
You didn't
So-
must have not understood my, that was just one thing here, but anyway.
So,
So how do you want to proceed?
I would like to make a few remarks and present this to you with the understanding that it's gonna be about a page and a half of things that go in a final plat to be given to you. I'll send it as an attachment to email as a Word document, so.
Okay.
I wouldn't do that with the whole chapter because it's very lengthy and probably your spam filters would not let them through to that long. And I'm not sure what it'll look like as an entire document if I translate it from Word Perfect to Word, so I
Okay.
won't take that chance. One small section I will, I can edit it after the fact. You'll get something, and then I will wait, and if people spot changes or don't understand things, I will make changes accordingly.
Okay.
I'm sure Merritt and Dunn will have some more. And when I think then I have a final, I will contact the chairman
Okay.
and let her look at it, and if she's satisfied, the next meeting we have, we'll just have a public hearing. But we'll do any more cleanup work. I think we're close enough that any more cleanup work can be done by emails back and forth until I get a very final clean copy pending public comment.
Okay,
So you need to set another meeting date, or that's something that could be done, or you
At the
wanna
end of
wait?
it, at the end of this meeting,
Whatever.
you're anxious to go home?
Well, I thought we were about to that point.
Well,
There is one other thing that we, that is not quite final yet. I went to an engineer, a friend of mine, about stormwater standards. We have come up, she made several suggestions, one of which was do not reference Boone County because their regulations are much, much more stringent now because of EPA and everything.
they're
than what
tier
we-
two.
Than what we need. So she wrote up some stuff, gave me some suggestions. I have written that up, given it to Lynn.
It's
but she
incorporated in that.
Yeah, but she has not reviewed it yet to see, I mean, one of the things that she suggested is that we talked about a discharge rate and use two different ones, one for residential property and one for commercial property. And a few different things. I mean, it's not hugely different than what it is, but there's a number of tweaks to it. And that, the discharge rate was the main thing, was to try to get something in there that, where residential and commercial properties are treated somewhat differently. Which she highly suggests, and most places do differentiate those.
I just put in the blank you left on the version you left to me, I put in DNR.
Okay.
I certainly wasn't gonna reference EPA, and I
No.
don't know anybody else whose standards I would consider best management practices as an easy reference.
There's some WWA or something like that, AWPA or something, I forget what it is, some standards that she will probably, AWPA, that she will probably reference for that.
Well, I
And
can
they're
make
for
that-
tier one cities and stuff rather than for the tier two.
Yeah, have I mentioned that in this body before? I've not mentioned it to the board. 15 years ago now, I think, the feds and EPA adopted a section of the Clean Water Act that said that not only you have to worry about treating sewage going into creeks, you have to worry about stormwater runoff. You know, putting salt and pesticides and all sorts of nasty things into the creeks. Probably not as much as the farmers are putting in from their fertilizer, but that's a whole different issue.
yes.
And there were new regulations developed, and it was tier one and tier two. And tier one was immediate, and it basically says you gotta adopt best management practices, which is sort of like a moving goal line. And that was it was based on size, and it was metropolitan counties and municipalities over a certain population, which I believe is still 10,000. We didn't apply. So Columbia and Boone County are tier one communities, and that's why Boone County's been dithering with stormwater for at least a decade.
Yeah.
Ashland got into a lawsuit with the Sierra Club, and part of their consent decree was they would adopt tier one's regulations.
Even though they weren't required by
Right.
EPA to do so.
We have so far missed their notice, but at some point, if we grow beyond 10,000 people, or if the feds decided, well, we'll harass the big boys long enough, now we can go after the little fish.
It
Literally.
could happen, I mean, it could happen.
Yeah. So we're doing halfway measures, it's just a matter of standard practice around here, but eventually we'll have to institutionalize it, and we're kicking the can down the road.
Originally, it looked like that when Boone County was going to come under this, it looked like that everybody in Boone County was going to be required to meet this next tier. Then they, for whatever reason, they decided to say that cities under 10,000 were exempt regardless of what county they were in.
Also doesn't have to worry any excursion and
So, but at some point that could change also.
Yeah, it could indeed, and that will be another change in several parts of this city code. And it will not be simple, because we're sort of at a high point where water flows in several directions away from us. And almost any part of the regulations say you're supposed to sample the various outfalls after a storm event, after any heavy rain. Well, we've got, I don't know any way you could do it without at least 5 and probably 7 monitoring points. And you do that after every rain, you take your sample, which is a pain, and then you send it and get the test done. And you're talking $300 worth of tests for each monitoring point after each rain. That could get real
Oh my gosh,
expensive.
yes. Yeah.
So I'm not relishing it.
And we should just tell the town.
It's not gonna change that circuit. I'll be paying for it someday.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay, so that's a little off.
okay.
There was another little change that I did after Dawn submitted his suggestions to me, and that was a little sentence about as-built plans need to be submitted with reference to monuments, so that we can incorporate all of the plans into our GIS system without having to tweak or adjust or anything like that. You might want to, I use monuments there, and maybe it should be benchmarks or something else.
It works, it probably ought to be benchmarks, but it essentially is the same thing.
That comes in at the end of section 10, which is reference to as-built drawings. It should be plural on the page too. Every time I look at this, I find another typo. That's what I get for typing this thing from scratch. Every time I retype Don's changes or marriage suggestions or anybody else's, I get rid of some typos and I just introduce more.
On page 11 also, under item 4,
Get there. Okay.
we should put a period after geographic reference system and just remove the other benchmarks so that we are on the same system. We now have enough benchmarks as a result of the GIS that we did last year. We had 2 benchmarks on the north side of town. We've also got 4 more that were added by DNR on the south side of town, and basically are survey grade monuments that have elevations on them. So there should be sufficient monuments in town that people can tie into our GIS, and that's what Lynn is intending, is that we get these plans, that they can be basically dropped into our GIS, especially like the as-bills, so that, we aren't constantly adding things to it, that some of this is done by the developers as it goes on, since there's a requirement in there for as-bills anyway.
What, could you repeat what you wanted to say? You wanted to change?
Under item 4 on D, put a period after geographic reference system
And just mark out the rest.
and mark out the rest. We're gonna take out the other benchmarks.
Okay. And you should know that, as promised, the final section dealing with amendments to this is added. It's not very long, it's consistent with the state law on the subject. If you can, and if there's another, welcome to look at that.
It basically says the procedures I envision, and I think I relate to the commission, which is, once we have it set, we will call for public hearings and advertise for them, and make, I'll put it up on the website as a PDF, but we'll have copies available at City Hall. At that point, we will have a public hearing before the commission. You will accept that input. I'm sure Mr. Adams will be back to express his viewpoint on developer mandates. You may make any changes you see fit, and then we recommend it to the board, presumably. And I can't envision you recommending the status quo and do nothing. And then the board itself will have another public hearing before they adopt anything by ordinance with or without further amendments.
And that is pretty much as it's outlined in statute anyway.
What Lynn described, the public hearing before this commission is something that's been done in the past for other kinds of things, and that's certainly fine. The state law only requires a public hearing before the Board of Aldermen, but it doesn't hurt to put the public notice to say there will be a public hearing before both the P and Z and the board, and it's one ad, so it doesn't cost that much different. And I think that's probably a good idea, but the provision in at the end just calls for a public hearing for the Board of Aldermen, because that's all that's required.
Changes, I kept the definition of alley at the front, but I just dropped any mention of alley when it's defined the second time under streets. Just dropped it out. So I changed it so it was the same definition both places, but it seemed to be redundant. Don suggested dropping it in one place, Mary suggested dropping it in the other. I picked between them. Let's see if there's anything else that was really germane. We left off the signature of the land surveyor on the submittal of the preliminary plat. That was a big whoop. So it's in there now.
Yeah.
Same on final plat, but you don't have that yet.
I think we lifted off of the improvement plans for the engineer also. But it's in there now also.
And Don's suggestion, every time it says registered engineer, it will say professional engineer instead. Lots and lots of things get changed, but the intent and the things that are required don't really change much at all. There was a section that Don thought might be dropped from the first subsection of lot split, but Merritt suggested keeping it, and I did. So, section 12A is in there at the moment, and I think probably should stay.
That's, I had written it originally as shall be deemed invalid. What this says is that the county recorder can't record it. Technically speaking, I guarantee you I can record it. So you cannot prevent the county recorder from accepting it and recording it.
Where is that again?
Page 19.
12 acres?
Page 20, lot split.
Okay.
Well, on the latest version is on page 19.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's just trying to say to somebody else that they can't, or not to do it. I mean, it doesn't.
Right.
I have not ever taken that to mean you can't physically go down there and
Yeah.
violate this, but it's just trying to say, don't do it.
Right.
It was suggested that down on C1 in the same paragraph, we eliminate or dedicated, with the thought that we don't want to prevent people from dedicating. But I reread it, and it says shall be required. Doesn't say anything about what they want to do voluntarily, so I think I want to let it stand as originally written. Turn my mouth just to set an example.
So when you said it would mean,
So it means while he's not here to speak up for himself. Don pointed out that, well, we can require a cul-de-sac if the plat that's gonna carry over with the through street to another lot. We did allow for, in the instance of Southwest Country State, because it was just a very short stubs
Right.
that people could do a wide turn and get out just as easily. But we needed to set some sort of length in there for that contingency.
Requirement for the.
So it's, at the moment, it says 125 feet, which is just a tad bit more than what's out in Southwest Country. And still, for a fire truck or a police car or an ambulance, they should be able to get in and out just as fast as if it was a cul-de-sac. Because it's not a very long street.
What we were trying to do there, and why Lennon suggested 150 feet, and I looked up the plat, and Southwest Country Estates is slightly longer than that, so technically it would have been allowed. So I suggested 175 feet, looking at the idea is you didn't want to allow 3 lots out there, you wanted to allow a maximum of 2 lots. Minimum lot width would be 60 feet, so at 175 feet, you can't get 3 lots. So it keeps it under that. But it allows a little bit bigger, than what Southwest Country is. And that was just a suggestion I had, that whatever we pick is going to be arbitrary. We don't want it to be arbitrarily very big. We want it to be, relatively small so that we don't have people backing up very far.
When we reviewed this, I've gotten the final plat list, that section to you, and I've accepted all your comments. This really does need to be digested in 1 or 2 sittings, so you get the interrelationship of the parts, rather than taking it section by section, because that's where, if there are any inconsistencies, they'll show up. So I will allow you adequate time to do that, and again, check typos. When that's all done and I'm assembling a final copy, there are a couple sections in here, 13.1 and 13.2. I will probably renumber everything from scratch.
Okay.
And that means that I will have to change some internal references between sections accordingly. So I will wait until the last minute before I do that.
Okay.
And as soon as that's done, you all get hard copies.
Now, as you read this, you will notice that in some places, it will seem like there's some language that you may have seen earlier in it. Theoretically, we could delete that, but practically speaking, some of that is good, as long as it doesn't say something different, as long as it says the same thing in both places. Right, as long as there's consistency.
It is a rather long chapter for somebody to try and find something in there and
Right, so it's kind of good to put some of that in more than one place, because, like I say, as long as the consistency is maintained, you don't have to be flipping through it, and trying to find where that little obscure thing was that you remember was there someplace.
It just kind of backs up what you said about reading it in a setting or two so that you can find any inconsistencies.
Now, I did not make any changes that would have flowed from Darren Adams' comments at the preceding meeting. It still requires the other half of the street, acquisition right away for the other half of the street, if necessary, roadways to a subdivision,
Right.
to be, just like the county does. And it has the same language that exists in the current code about reimbursement for sanitary sewers to developers, the long way out was undeveloped land in between.
You mentioned that's 1-13.2 is what you're talking about.
And the point, well, point 1 is sewers, point 2 is the roads. That's a new one that wasn't available at the last meeting.
Now the streets as roads is 13.2.
It's somewhat simpler because all we're talking about is the other half of the road in some cases. there aren't as many contingencies or possibilities for roads as there are for sewers. But I just want to make that on record, if after thinking about it or hearing Mr. Adams testify again, that's something you want to change. It's in there as originally proposed
Okay.
at the moment.
Anything further, Don, that we should be?
No.
Okay.
I mean, if we want to discuss whether we keep that in there or not, I mean, there are arguments on both sides of it. It's a matter of what you consider to be fair. I was talking with James about it the other day, and I pointed out, I said, Olympic speed skating and bicycling, you gain some advantage by not being the front person, by being close enough to them to let them break the wind, and you gain some advantages by not having to work quite as hard by being right behind them. Is that fair? Well, in the Olympics and then bicycling, yes, that's perfectly fair. And then you have enough to get around them and actually win because you let them do the work in advance. But if you look at it from the aspect of copyright law and patents, we do allow copyrights and patents that allow people to protect themselves for limited periods also. So, it's a matter of how you come down on fairness on some of this stuff.
You're gonna put a lot of thought in that comparison, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, not really. I mean, it really is a matter of how you look at
Yeah.
things. And there are arguments on both sides. Some cities allow it, some cities do not. I mean,
Which was the discussion
once-
that is here.
Once it's dedicated, anybody can tie to it at any time.
Yeah.
Other cities, are very, look at it and they go, no, we think it's more fair to let the second guy pay.
Right.
Because in bigger towns, you might get developers who would follow one another around. They'll put a subdivision right across the road after this guy improves it, and they will gain the advantage over what the other guy did.
Right, which is,
They've consistently done that in some places.
that was a discussion we had the last
Right.
year. Okay.
So, the question is, you gotta look at it in your mind as to which one of those you think is fair, and it's not a cut and dried issue. I mean, I won't discount the points he brings up, but, I come down on the side of it, I think it would be more fair to do what you've got in here now.
And as staff, I take the position that as long as somebody else is paying, it's right, but the city does not have surplus monies to go and do these things in order to enhance the development by putting in long distances of sanitary sewer or long distances of road improvements. At the very least, we'd have to bond that out and pass the cost along to the general taxpayer. So, at some point, those improvements are necessary for a proper development and have to be borne by the developer. Otherwise, they won't get done at all.
Yes.
As Mr. Mathis keeps telling the people in downtown Columbia with the 24-story high-rise.
You did make the time limit different for the streets than for the sewers, did you get into that?
Yes, I believe that was discussed, and that was the timing that was mentioned. I did not change anything on the current section dealing with sewers.
So now should we look at dates for meetings? How long do you want to, in between when, when?
How long do people think they would like to have to review this and that last page and a half that I'll be distributing this and get back to us all? It could be real simple, but if somebody has something that's important that they notice that this escaped our notice. It might take a little bit of time to get that information out to the other commission members and get some reaction back. But even that would be preferable to having another meeting that doesn't really,
And we're looking at Thursday nights again, is that right? Well, no, sorry, could you come on Wednesday?
Yeah, you could come on with,
Or you?
Thursday,
No, Thursday.
Thursday was tonight.
Wednesday works better, but that's,
Somebody had something on Wednesday. You?
From 6 to 7, but
Somebody could be at
Start
7 if
7,
you did it
fine.
Wednesday, okay.
that's how we got the meeting.
Yeah, I know, just making sure.
It may be this weekend before I get, anything back from the engineer on stormwater stuff, but, that should be, what we've got in there, it would be a matter of tweaking what's in there instead of completely rewriting
We're
it.
talking about March.
So we're talking about March 5th or 12th then?
fifth or twelfth?
Mhm.
March fifth is Ash Wednesday, if that matters to anybody.
I'm good. Good, okay.
Yeah.
Any objections to the 5th?
I'm still looking at a calendar, this
Okay.
one, I don't know.
When's Ash Wednesday again?
It's on March fifth.
March fifth?
Sunday.
I would object to, well, I won't be here. I mean, you can do what you
So
want,
we can
but I
move it
won't
to
be
the-
here.
So look at the 12th then,
That would work for me.
that works for me.
March 12th?
Yeah? That okay with you? Good, good? Oh, yeah? Sure? Okay. You look like you're still looking at your calendar.
I don't know at this point.
Okay. It's 7 o'clock then,
7
March
o'clock.
12th.
So my apologies that we didn't accomplish as much as I had hoped, and we weren't, we still have one more hurdle before we get to the public hearing.
Okay.
We're getting there.
Okay. Anything else before we go, otherwise? Okay? Do we need? Adjourn then?
Motion we adjourn.